Right, welcome everybody to the Board of Education special meeting on the Educator Effectiveness Grant on December 14th, 2021. We are convening at 5:34 p.m. Let's go ahead and start with a call to order and a roll call. We will have board member Raquel Alvarez present.
Okay.
Present.
Eric Joyce.
Present.
Mike Blessing.
Present.
And Eleanor Evans. Not yet. All right, so we have 4 out of the 5. So we're going to get started. Let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'd put your hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, 1C, public hearing on the Educator's Effectiveness Block Grant. We are going to open a public hearing at 5:35 p.m. There will be a presentation from Dr. Levy. After the presentation, we'll see if we have any public speakers. If there are no speakers, we will close the hearing and we'll have a conversation. This is not a voting item. There will be an agenda item at 6 p.m. at our usual meeting. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Levy.
Good evening, Board of Education. Thank you so much for allowing this time for us to share the Educator Effectiveness Grant. This presentation will outline how we will be using funding that has been allocated for us to support the learning and professional growth of our employees. Tonight, Dr. Lawrence and Mrs. Gravlin will be outlining the focus of this grant along with our key indicators of success. So the Educator Effectiveness Block Grant was established by Assembly Bill 130. This is a $1.5 billion investment in California's educator workforce. And these funds are allocated in a way that we would call a entitlement grant, which means that that grant is put forward as an equal amount per a particular demographic, in this case, our certificated and classified full-time employees, and that we received a certain amount of funding for each of these employees. Oceanside Unified School District's amount is $3.9 million over the next 5 years. In order to receive this money, we had to develop and adopt a plan by December 30th in 2021. We found out that we were eligible for this funding the last week in October. So this meant that we needed to think very quickly and carefully about how we can carefully plan on this money being used most effectively, and that it will build on the success and the planning that we've done previous to being awarded this money. So this money is also going to be having a data and expenditure report due every year, and annually we can adjust as we move forward. Next slide, please. So as we look at this graphic here, that we see that we have always established our LCAP goals. Our goal 1 is that all students graduate prepared for college and career. Goal 2 is that we create a safe and positive learning environment. And goal 3 is that we meaningfully engage with our family and community. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So as we look at our funding that we have, this graphic outlines both our LCAP goals and the money that we have received from COVID-19 recovery funds. So with the COVID-19 recovery funds, we identified 9 different areas, everything from mental health counselors, expanded learning opportunities, professional learning, transitional kindergarten, our facilities, our technology, support for additional classified and certificated personnel, our PPE, and curriculum, instructional materials, supplies, and equipment. So when we were looking at our Educator Effectiveness Grant monies, we thought it was most important that we did look back into our LCAP goals and into the areas of priority that were outlined in the Educator Effectiveness Grant. So if you look under mental health and counselors, you'll see that that aligns with our LCAP goals number 1 and number 2. as well as priority areas for the Educator Effectiveness Grant in social emotional learning, school climate, and inclusive practices. So you can see each of these areas we thought carefully about how this money can be used to further the goals that we've established in partnership with our community. Next slide, please. In our Educator Effectiveness Block Grant, it is important that we provide professional learning to promote educator equity, quality, and effectiveness. And this is money that's eligible for teachers, paraprofessionals, administrators, everyone who works with students. And there are 10 allowable uses that can be addressed. In the next few slides, we will be explaining how each of these 10 allowable uses have been addressed in our Educator Effectiveness Plan. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mrs. Gravelin.
Thank you, Dr. Levy, and good evening, board members. As Dr. Levy mentioned, there are 10 allowable areas for our plan, and we'll be going over those tonight with you. While it's not required that we address each, we have done so in our plan. The dollar amount for our grant is $3,979,250, which can be expended over a 5-year period. And there is a copy of the grant that is linked in your slide. Next slide, please. So just a quick note, as you're looking at each of these slides, you're going to notice a dollar amount that is allocated, and next to it, you're going to see an EE or an SE. Just to note that EE is elementary education and SE is secondary. Our first allowable area is coaching and mentoring. In an effort to hire and retain highly qualified staff members, the grant will support professional development for newly hired classified, certificated, and administrative staff prior to them beginning their assignment and provide ongoing support during their first year of employment. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry, Dr. Gravelin.
Yes.
Is that like a induction program support?
No, so this would be slightly different than induction, obviously different than induction. This would be opportunities for us to help our newly hired individuals learn more of the scope of the work that they will be doing and completing so that we can offer them ongoing help and assistance.
Is the money for a person or like them releasing from their job time or all of the above kind of thing?
The money would go towards training for them inside for hours for their training and support. And I know Dr. Levy's jumping on here too, so I know she'll add to this, but it's for the hours to help support their training, or if we should happen to need additional staff to come on board to assist them.
So while we do have an induction program for our certificated newcomer teachers, that's generally something that's been organized just for those first few years. But when we get an experienced educator that we hire on, they may be understanding being an educator, but how do they best understand Oceanside Unified School District, the programs we use, the local context, our cultural norms, our society, all of these things. And when we talk more about our community coordinators, you'll see that it's been really important that we did spend the time to equip them with the skills in both the different programs that we use and in our computer systems, as well as really grounding them in the cultural society and the community that we have here. So we know that that's really important to the success and equity of our programs.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, when I ask these questions, I totally recognize this has been a really fast turnaround. So I know that not all the details are completely flushed, but thank you. I appreciate the response.
No, we appreciate the questions for the clarification, and thank you for Dr. Levy's eloquent response to that. So on to our next allowable area. Our programs that will lead to effective standards-aligned instruction and improve instruction and literacy across subject areas. So educators will participate in professional learning to further cross-content literacy. The focus will be on instructional strategies that advance a student's ability to read, write, and speak in each of the content areas they are studying. Specific for secondary education will be the purchase of curriculum to support literacy A TOSA will also be brought on board to push in and virtual professional learning opportunities for specifically designed to advance literacy strategies applicable to all content areas. Next slide, please. Our allowable area number 3, practices and strategies that re-engage pupils and lead to accelerated learning. The intent is to provide specific research-based programming and instruction that accelerates student learning. And these programs may include, but are not limited to, AVID, access to credit recovery, intervention opportunities using specifically designed curricula, monitoring of student progress towards college and career preparedness through the support of a college and career readiness TOSA, counselor training through the American School Counselor Association. Okay. And at this point in time, I'm going to have us switch to the next slide and turn the presentation over to my colleague, Dr. Lawrence.
Good evening, members of our board and Superintendent Vitale. I will now cover allowable area number 4, which is social emotional learning. This allowable area creates opportunities for professional learning, access to consultants for mental health supports, and additional opportunities to strengthen and expand high-quality programs that support students' well-being. This work would allow for expansion and development of our district's multi-tiered systems of support, which outlines the support for all students in academic, social emotional learning, mental health, and behavior. Next slide, please. Allowable area number 5 is the area of school climate. This would provide opportunities to grow and foster stronger, positive school environments that are inclusive, accepting, and supportive of our diverse student populations. To achieve this, it is essential that staff and students engage in this work to ensure that students and staff are supported and that the implementation is successful. To attain this, we have identified key training and systems that foster a greater connection to school. These include restorative practices that re-engage students in learning, building skills in addressing biases, and reducing bullying. Next slide, please.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Trustee Joyce.
So if it's 100,000 for all of those things, those are all the choices that we could choose from. I assume the 100,000 wouldn't cover the training for all of that. These are examples of which ones we could choose from. Okay.
These are examples, and there may be others that are offered to us as we begin to think about and plan other strategies that we would be able to adopt. Oftentimes, some of these opportunities are at a lower cost than others.
Okay, and whether or not we're the staff that's presenting or not, 100,000 would. How much does it cost for us to get a release day for all of our staff? It's a lot, right?
Yeah, so Mr. Joyce, actually 2 things. It's actually $200,000 that we've allocated in this area. And it's a great question about how much it costs to release staff members. Currently, what we know is that we have a shortage of certificated and classified subs. So we really have to think differently about how we're going to provide the professional learning. So typically before we would be like, well, we'll do sub release to provide professional learning. So what we've been challenged to do is think about how can we push into a teacher's classroom to provide that side-by-side support in real time. So really a coaching model, which is why we're going to having some TOSA so that they are able to do that and work in partnership. In addition to that, how do we start thinking about on-demand and just-in-time training that can be done virtually, either led by one of our TOSAs. So for example, if let's say you're looking at a restorative practice, you could have a after school Zoom meeting and bring in people from multiple areas. We would pay them for their time as professionals and then be able to provide that training. So the $100,000 would go in different ways, both to provide push in training, but in this case, it's going to be things that would be Zoom, and we would be paying an hourly rate for people to participate in these different ideas.
Okay, and those would be voluntary then if they were after the school day.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next allowable area is allowable area number 6, inclusive practices. which provides an increased focus on the necessary enhanced support for our students with disabilities in order to increase their outcomes of success in our classrooms. The focus of these funds will be on the training of educational specialists, coordinator twos, general education teachers, and department leads on the development of structured supports, plans, and strategies that lead to increasing successful inclusive practices for our students to meet their fullest potential. Next slide, please. Allowable area number 7 is language acquisition, which increases the support for our multilingual learners, which is a focus for our district. This expenditure would provide enhanced curriculum to support both our integrated and designated ELD programs, which will include associated curriculum training, targeted training, and intervention opportunities will be provided to increase bilingual and biliterate proficiency rates for our multilingual learners to lead to higher reclassification rates. Allowable area number 8 provides professional learning networks, which allocates funding for staff to engage in professional learning networks that will support the growth of one's school, department, or grade level in a manner that supports the site's written SIPSA, WASC, or plan goals for achievement. Allowable area number 9 provides specific funding for growth, support, and development of the ethnic studies programs transition. For our district, it would be a transition from being an elective course into being a graduation requirement, beginning with the graduating class of 2030 as a result of Assembly Bill 101. This expenditure will provide resources for the necessary planning, community meetings, curriculum updates, and instructional materials necessary to ensure that this mandatory course is in place prior to the required implementation year of the 24-25 school year. That would ensure that our students in the graduating class of 2030 has the ability to graduate with this requirement in hand. I now turn it over to Mrs. Graveline.
And our final allowable area, Area 10, provides funding to support teachers and staff working in our early childhood education programs with training and best practices related to such areas as data tracking, using the desired results developmental profile, also looking at behavioral modifications and additional support strategies for students with exceptional needs and our youngest learners. So I now turn it over to Dr. Lovey.
Thank you, Mrs. Graveline. Thank you, Dr. Lawrence. So this concludes our presentation of our Educator Effectiveness Block Grant. This is a information item only at this board meeting. We will have it as a bring back in our next meeting where there will be a request to vote to approve accepting this grant. Acceptance of this will allow us to access that almost $4 million over the next 5 years in professional learning for our staff.
Thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to reiterate this is your plan on such a short runway, right, to put together, and it's adjustable as we set priorities and continue our work around inclusive practices, restorative practices, SEL, right?
Absolutely. And we want to continue to leverage. We're very excited because we've been successful in getting grants. So as we get new grants, we try to shift the funding into the highest area needs and continue to monitor our progress. So we might have an area that we work on for a while, but we don't need that anymore. So we'll move on to something else. And again, annually, we can readjust this to align with our LCAP goals and our other funding that's available. And perhaps we won't have a shortage in subs and we can shift again.
Excellent. Thank you. So this is going to adjourn our Board of Education special meeting at 5:53 p.m. We will start a new at 6:05 p.m. So that will give you almost a 10-minute break, board members. See you then.